Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. I'm really excited to have with me Amy Lundy today, and we're going to be talking about not just the ATP side, but the WTA side as well, reviewing 2022 as well as we can in a set amount of time. So we're going to try our best. Amy, how you doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I was just saying that it's weird. I'm home alone for the first time in a while, so yeah, just twiddling my thumbs, and it'll be nice to chat. We haven't talked in a bit of time, so it'll be nice to talk tennis. So I guess we can start on the ATP side, and I know everyone's going to talk about Nadal and Djokovic first. So I'm going to try and go away from that. I'm going to go for the world number one in Carlos Alcaraz. But before we get into that, I mean, what was your view of mainly the ATP side and how you saw it this year? I mean, did you see it as an exciting year of tennis, or was it maybe didn't quite live up to expectations? And what are your thoughts around it?
Very exciting. I think we're in an ascending year for the ATP, maybe having been slightly down the previous year. And so many amazing things happened. Young players emerging, players like Carlos Alcaraz that we knew had the goods, ascending to world number one, Roger Federer's retirement. I thought it was an interesting year with some controversies. Not that that's a good thing, but the points scandal at Wimbledon and the continued vaccination drama, it was just interesting. There was always something going on. But in terms of the talent, I think the ATP is going to be fine. They've got some really great, young, exciting players.
Yeah, agreed. There's definitely a lot of, like as you said, it's really exciting, but there's definitely be enough up and downs for the Netflix documentary to be really successful, I imagine. So we can talk about some of that. But of course, the Wimbledon points, and then the whole Djokovic Australian Open visa situation. And then of course he wasn't allowed to US Open. There's Tsitsipas and Kyrgios, that match at Wimbledon. And then I mean Kyrgios just in general, I guess, up and down. And then Tsitsipas and now on-court coaching. So there's a whole array of things going on, as you said. So it's been an exciting year, I think. But it's good to see crowds back as well. I feel like that has made a big difference, because I know last year there were some restricted crowds, but some tournaments didn't have them. And 2020, of course, as well was similar. So it was good to see pretty much just packed crowds now everywhere, which was really good. And we saw some fantastic atmospheres in some of the tournaments as well, which is great. So let's start off with world number one. And we're talking about young, exciting players, and doesn't really come, much bigger than Carlos Alcaraz, who's somehow plummeted his way to the summit of the sport. I mean, an incredible season, US Open winner, won Madrid, and I'm sure we'll touch on that in a second, but beating Nadal and Djokovic and consecutively, then beating Zverev in the final of that tournament as well. I mean, one of the hardest, I think, Masters 1000 runs I've seen, and most impressive anyway. I mean, what did you think of his year as a whole? I mean, were you surprised? Because for me, I was saying to everyone before the start of the year that I thought most likely he would win his first slam next year, was my prediction. But I said if he were to win one, but I'll caveat this because I didn't truly believe it. I said it would be the US Open because it's towards the back end of the year. And he would have then had time to implement what he'd really been working on the off season, which was, I guess, the more physical side of the sport. And we saw that the US Open when he played, I think it was like 17 hours over the last four matches, even, which was, I mean, unbelievable. But yeah, what were your thoughts on Alcaraz and his year as a whole?
Really successful year overall. Winning a Grand Slam. He got a little bit lucky that Djokovic was not in the field, but as you mentioned, he beat Djokovic, so anything could have happened, not to take anything away from him. His biggest challenge now going forward is going to be figuring out how to not play so much, both macro and micro, not play so much on the calendar, not say yes to everything. He's a global superstar now. Everybody wants a piece of him. So he's going to have to manage his obligations and his playing and his calendar, which tournaments he's going to play so carefully. And then on the court, he really needs to run some patterns and not grind on every single point, not have, and that's hard to do. Like, you're 19 years old, you're want to run for everything, but he really does, I think, need some specific patterns of play and to uh, make use of the +1 forehand and shorten points as best he can. Otherwise, he's going to grind himself into the ground. But overall, blissfully successful year. I just wish we could have seen him at the ATP finals.
Yeah, agreed. It would have been great to see him at the ATP Tour Finals for sure. I actually had tickets for, so it was the Nadal Rude match in the end. It would have been, but I felt ill, so that was gutting. But it's okay. Next year, hopefully I'll go. But Alcaraz, 19 years of age and youngest year-end #1 in the Open era, and there's loads of, and there's a lot of records, but like being banded about him, and he's clearly an incredible talent. But just a couple of stats here for those physicians out there. So overall win percentage, which I like to talk about because I feel total matches won isn't necessarily as accurate because people like Nadal and Djokovic don't play as many matches as say Tsitsipas nowadays. I think he played he had 60 wins, I think it was this year. So he's played a lot of matches. But Alcaraz played 67 matches, had a 55-12 record, but 82% that is then win percentage, which is really impressive. Won the US Open, Miami, Madrid, Rio de Janeiro, and Barcelona. So 5 titles, including a slam and 2 Masters 1000 tournaments. So, I mean, incredibly impressive from him as well. And it's definitely a breakthrough year. I mean, he was 31, I think it was, at the start of the year. So to finish at world #1, I think it's well and truly his breakthrough year, and he's really announced himself onto the big stage. And I agree. I think he needs to manage his calendar. Like, it was crazy that he played Davis Cup the week after he'd won the US Open. And then he lost to Felix, and you're thinking, well, that's not surprising because you've just played 17 hours of tennis, and then I understand he wants to play for his country, but it's probably, I think it was 3 days later he played, and I was thinking
Wow.
that's
Yeah,
just
yeah, you're right.
ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then he played Felix and he lost in straight sets. And I was just thinking, well, I'm not surprised. I mean, I'm surprised he could even play, to be honest with you. So I think there is a bit of the exuberant youth about him where he feels like he's invincible. And I guess everyone does at 19 years of age. But I guess longer term, it will have an effect on him. So I agree on the patterns of play as well. I feel like sometimes he gets caught between grinding too much or going too big at times. So it's like he's caught in between, and then he needs to find a medium, I'm sure, which is easy for us to say because he just won a slam and he's had so much success. But I guess it's about taking taking his game, even to the next level. And it'll be interesting to see him come up against Nadal, Djokovic at a slam this year as well, because obviously that didn't happen at the US Open. But yeah, fantastic year. Just lastly on him, actually, I wanted to ask you about something a bit more technical on his game. So I kept on talking about how throughout this year he's been really impressive. But one thing that was highlighted to me throughout the middle part of the year, when he lost his Zverev at Roland Garros, and then he lost a few times to Sinner on grass and then clay, was I felt that, and Musetti as well, he lost in a final, I remember, in Umag. And my thinking was the reason why these losses had occurred was because he seems to have a slight weakness against players with elite backhands. And that's not to say that he doesn't have a solid backhand himself, but when it comes to defending on his backhand side, he would struggle against people with elite backhands who could really attack him on that side, find angles, drag him out, and make him feel uncomfortable. And I felt like at Wimbledon he was slicing a lot against Sinner, mainly because he was just rushed on that side. But for me, then when we got to the US Open, I had seen a difference, and he did adjust, and he beat Sinner at the US Open. And he clearly, for me anyway, identified that problem and then worked on it and managed to solve it to a degree. I don't know if you saw something similar or had that same thought as well.
Yeah, possibly. I think you raised a really good point. And he's one of these guys that probably wants to run around and hit as much forehand as he possibly can. He's got the speed, the footwork, the skills to be able to do that on a multitude of surfaces. So that may be something he needs to look at in the off season. At the same time, I don't want to put so much on him. Like, okay, he won a Grand Slam, he's become world number one, and now we expect him to win every final or every match. He's not one of the big three. He's not a robot. So expect some losses. And, just in terms of the backhand defending on that side, nobody likes to do that, maybe with the exception of Novak Djokovic. Nobody's particularly wonderful at that. So, yeah, that may be a kink that he can continue to look at.
Yeah, agreed. And I saw Djokovic actually at the Laver Cup play against Tiafoe, and he ripped him apart. And I watched him and just thought, as you say, on the backhand side, I think he played almost as well as he could, and it was so clinical and it was over so quickly. But I was almost happy to be there because he just played so well. I'd never seen him before as well live, so that was a real treat. And talking about Djokovic, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to bunch together two of the greatest players of all time, in Djokovic and Nadal, and ask you a pretty tricky question. But who do you think had the better 2022 season? Because I feel like the first half of the year was obviously Rafa played incredibly well. We'll talk about him playing against Medvedev as well in the final of the Australian Open, and coming back from 2-0 down, and no one really expected him to win it. His last slam was at Roland Garros, and he just played the Melbourne Somerset the week before, and that was it. And then he went into that, not cold, but only after playing a few matches, really, in, 6 or 7 months. Then won Roland Garros after beating Djokovic as well, but then Djokovic bounces back at Wimbledon, and then obviously he couldn't play the US Open, and Alcaraz ends up winning that as well. But Djokovic finished the year really well, winning in the ATP finals as well, and also winning a couple of other tournaments like Nur Sultan, etc. So what are your thoughts on who had the better season overall?
This is so tough. It really is. I mean, in fact, when we were just talking before we hit record on this, I thought, I'm probably going to say Novak. But listening to you list everything, I think what tips it for me to Nadal is that he won on his worst slam, on his worst surface. That Australian Open victory was so surprising because remember, he had been hurt
Yeah,
and he had COVID, and nobody was really expecting much of that guy. And then the controversy with Novak, which was very for the entire tennis world, it was very kind of disruptive and took us away from the tennis. And Nadal just, tunnel vision. Went through. He won the tournament before, which nobody gave him credit for because it was a 250, and then he won that one. And the way he beat Medvedev in that final, and then he did his usual, his regular, and he won Roland Garros when many said that nope, he's over, he's toast, he's done, he's too old. And so for that reason, and then there's one other reason, and that is that he went deep at Wimbledon as
Yeah, he
well.
did. Yeah.
So you put all that together, in a year that his wife was expecting their first baby, and his good friend Roger Federer was going to retire and all that, I'm going to tip it to Nadal.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually did a specific video on this as well, and it was interesting. The comment section was very, with differing opinions, but very interesting opinions on it as well. And I agree. I tend to agree because I think I'm putting aside the fact that Djokovic couldn't compete in slams because otherwise it's very easy to get stuck in that and say, well, he didn't play Australia, didn't play the US. But I feel like you just have to forget about it, which some people might think is unfair. But I just think you can only play, tournaments you can play. So if we're taking that into consideration, then I feel like Nadal, I mean, the Australian Open win, in my opinion, is one of the greatest wins like in a long time. Just the way, like the position he was in before the tournament. And then, as you said, his worst slam, he had a lot of scar tissue from finals at the Australian Open. And then the way that he came back from 2 sets, and I think it was a breakdown against Medvedev. And I think you actually shared it on Twitter. I think his win percentage on Emphasis, win predictor, even was saying 4%, I think it was, at that point. And then obviously he came back, which is incredible. So, which is just amazing. And then at Roland Garros. He got revenge on Novak after last year in the quarterfinals, which was impressive, and managed to go on and win it. And then Wimbledon, I mean, he retired, but who knows? I mean, does he beat Kyrgios? Doesn't he? Will never know. We were, I guess, stolen a potential Nadal Djokovic match there, which Djokovic would have been the favorite. But yeah, that was impressive as well. So I agree. But Novak had a fantastic year. And actually, if you look at win percentage, he has the higher one. He has 87% is his win percentage, 41-6. Nadal 83%, 39-8. And that's mainly because going into the ATP Tour finals, I think Novak was at 82%, but then he cleaned up in the ATP Tour finals. I think it was 6 matches, obviously no losses. So he played so well, and arguably one of, if not the best indoor player ever as well. So, but yeah, in terms of titles for Nadal, Australian Open, Roland Garros, Acapulco, and Melbourne, as you said, which I feel like that's such an underrated win, because I felt like it really helped him for Australia, because it was right before on the courts. And a lot of people wouldn't have thought at the time, but I think in hindsight, it really does prove how important it was. And then Djokovic, Wimbledon, ATP Tour Finals, Rome, Astana, and Nur Sultan, and Tel Aviv as well. So, I mean, 2 incredible years and 2 halves, I think, for sure. But looking forward to seeing them both play, because Rafa says he's not going to retire anytime soon, apparently. So that's surprising to me, but I'm happy about it. And Djokovic, I think, has never even. I don't think he's even entertained retirement. I mean, he's probably going to be playing until he's 40.
Why would he?
So,
yeah.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Why would he? He doesn't have any injuries, really, not major ones. So, yeah. In terms of other players, then, I wanted to ask you about Holger Rune and his little, I guess, rise towards the end of the year. And he made the quarterfinals at Roland Garros, so it wasn't a massive surprise to see him then win Paris, Munich, and Stockholm. But he clearly had some incredible wins. What are your thoughts on him as an exciting young talent coming through?
Yeah, I think he's here to stay. He's probably going to have some up and down, moments, and he ended the year on an up, obviously. But he's got the varied game, and right now he's got the energy, and he's got the data usage. I know he scouts and looks at patterns and that kind of thing. So the only question really is his personality, because he's feisty and he kind of gets into little tussles with the other players. But then again, look at John McEnroe, look at Jimmy Connors. That personality type can certainly, Leighton Hewitt, that personality type can certainly make it on the ATP Tour. So I think he's here to stay.
Yeah, agreed. I think the way that he plays as well is so interesting for me, and the fact that he beat Novak as well in the final in Paris is something that we haven't seen from these guys at this age, because Alcaraz, of course, did it in a semi and a quarterfinal at Rome, which is incredibly impressive. But for Rune to do it in a final as well, I thought was really, really impressive in the way that he battled and he played. And it was almost like you couldn't really see any major weaknesses in his game at the time, and it was an impressive performance. But he seems more well-rounded, I think, than I remember him being last year, and I think he's definitely improved on his serve as well, his defensive ability from the back of the court. So he's another, I think, exciting player coming through. Before we go on to the WTA side, I had a couple of questions. The first one is, so I think, well, I don't know whether it feeds into the Nadal Djokovic question, but who for you was your kind of best performing player of the year?
Then that would have to be Djokovic. If I give the player of the year to Nadal, then the best performing player is going to have to be Djokovic. There were some other players like Rune and Tsitsipas who had, very good years by any standard almost, except for the very, very best. But for Novak to recover from what happened in Australia, and he admitted that it was tough for him mentally to get over that. And he lost to Rublev, shortly after in Serbia, actually, shortly after he returned to the tour. And then, to hold up as well as he did and go on to win Wimbledon, and then to finish the year like a tornado. And he's playing the way that he likes to play, with his, stretching the court and just playing around with aggression and defense. And the way that he was serving in that run at the ATP finals was just next level. So as
Yeah,
a performer, it's Novak.
very diplomatic. I like it. You covered all the bases. Yeah, exactly. In terms of your breakthrough player, you got the player that I guess kind of really broke through this year for you.
Yeah, that would have to be Runa.
Hmm.
Because, as you mentioned, the win in Paris against Novak, and there were so many opportunities for him to lose that match.
Yeah.
But his trajectory has been very steep. Like I think of somebody, we're going to talk about the women in just a minute. Like I think of someone like Coco Gauff, who
Hmm.
has been around a while, and her trajectory has been up, but it's been a little
Steady. Yeah.
flatter. Yeah. Whereas Runa's trajectory has been very steep. So yeah, he's my and some great wins, some key wins on tour this year. He would be my breakthrough.
Hmm. Yeah. I agree. I agree. I think he was ranked outside the top 100 because of the protected rankings because of the pandemic. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, incredible. He broke into the top 10. I think he ended up number 11 in the end at the end of the year. But I
Yeah, he
mean,
was an alternate at the ATP,
yeah, he
and at
was.
least in the race. Yeah.
Yeah, he was. So incredible, incredible season, and looking forward to seeing him next year. And then match of the year for you.
Match would have to be the Nadal Medvedev at the Australian Open final. Although there have been some great ones, Nadal Fritz, Nadal FAA. Oh, it's funny how Rafa had so many good matches this year. But it was just so unexpected and just so surprising the way that it all unfolded. And for Nadal to come back, and the fifth set was just, you didn't know twists and turns. You didn't know what was going to happen next. It was grinding. It was gutty. You saw the one of the greatest players to ever play the sport experiment with coming to the net, and doing some off speed stuff and changing up his return position, which he hardly ever does, on his least preferred surface. And to me, that was one of the greatest tennis matches that I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah, agreed. It was an incredible watch, and the way that he came back as well was just unbelievable. So hard to disagree with that for sure. Okay, on to the women's, and as you said, and we have to start off with, I mean, Iga Swiatek. She's just so dominant this year, and if it wasn't for Ash Barty at the start of the year winning the Australian Open, I mean, it would be like we spent the whole time talking about her. But I mean, I can talk about some of her stats from this year, which is just absolutely mind-boggling. Genuinely, like the amount of titles and her win. So win percentage was 88.2%. So talking about, and she played 76 matches. So she played almost double the amount of matches that say Djokovic did, and he was on 87%. Right, so unbelievable. Not only that, she won San Diego, the US Open, Roland Garros, Rome, Stuttgart, Miami, Indian Wells, Doha, Rome. Also Rome, sorry, that's in 2021, that one. But I mean, how many titles is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 titles this year. I mean, including 2 Grand Slams. Absolutely, just incredible, unbelievable year, and I think she's revolutionized her game, in my opinion, in terms of her. So especially her forehand. I mean, her forehand, she can hit so many different ways, and it's so efficient and effective, and just powerful on the back of the court. It blows opponents away nowadays as well. So, and she's so dynamic as well. She's constantly looking to improve. I even saw towards the back end of the year she was trying to come to the net a little bit. I was like, oh, this is interesting. So she's always looking to improve her game, it seems, as well. I mean, what's been your view on her season as a whole?
Absolutely incredible. At the start of the year, I was so excited to see Ash Barty win the Australian Open, and I thought, okay, here we go. We've got another marquee name or player emerge that will, become a household name. And then she promptly retires, and it seems like eons ago. And then Ava just like a bull rushed right in and started winning up, down, and all around. Player of the year, performer of the year, everything of the year. You mentioned all the stats. You mentioned her forehand, which I don't mean to be like take a shot at anyone or be gender whatever or pejorative, but it is like a man, the racket head speed that she achieves. It's the perfect kinetic use of kinetic energy. And I just think that she can still improve. She can improve her serve, and that is scary. That's really scary because she wins a lot of her service games, but she could do a little bit better on first serve points won. She's a great returner. So, you know, she could she could vie for the calendar slam for sure.
Yes, she could. I agree with the returning point as well. She takes the ball so early, and her backhand isn't a weakness, right? With a lot of people on the tour, it can be. And I agree with the comparison between herself and some of the male players, and I don't think it's anything bad in saying. I think I don't know whether it was her coach or someone from her team said that they've taken inspiration from the way that the men hit the forehand, because now the women are strong enough to be able to hit it like that. And you talked about the kinetic transfer of weight as well. And the racket head speed is just incredible. And there was a comparison at Roland Garros. I mentioned it quite a few times this year, where they measured the speed of Swiatek's forehand against Nadal's, and the average was the same. That's how hard she's been hitting it,
Mm-hmm.
which is just incredible. So she is revolutionizing women's tennis, and it's great to see her do that. And it's also been interesting to see the other girls kind of try and keep up with her as well, and it'll be intriguing to see whether they can kind of figure her out more than they have done so this year, or whether it is going to be more domination. As you said, it could be the Canada Slam. I think her biggest obstacle is Wimbledon, and knowing exactly how to move on that surface and adapt to how it plays, because I feel like she looked a bit uncomfortable this year on it, but everything else is just like is almost hers to lose at the moment. So we'll see how she gets on. I mean, in terms of the others, and I say the others because that's kind of like how it was this year. We can talk about Ons Jabeur and her year, because she made a couple of finals and heartbreak similar to, I guess, Casper Ruud, and both players, had very good years, made slam finals, but lost, in both those slam finals as well. I mean, what's your opinion on how her season went? I felt like at Wimbledon there was a very, very good chance to win. She was the favourite, but didn't manage to do it. But yeah, I mean, can she challenge next year, for example?
Absolutely. She's one of my favorite to watch. She's very entertaining. She has incredible jumping ability, which you don't think of like you think of basketball as being a sport where you need
Yeah.
like hops, but it actually helps her. She's got hands, very quick instincts. I would like to see her. She's clearly in my mind the second best player on tour right now. I would like to see her freewheel less and really run some more disciplined, specific patterns and not rely so much on just like her athletic ability and her quick hands and her quick um, instincts and fast twitch. Um, but she's got all the tools, she's got every shot. And she's very entertaining. She's exactly what the tour needs right now, a barrier breaking player. First Arab woman, first African woman from the African continent to enter the top 5 and be in a Grand Slam final. And she did it twice. So, love her. Love her. Very, very fun to watch.
Yeah, agreed. And the freewheeling is interesting because I think she said after the Caroline Garcia match, it was at the US Open, the semi-final, and she won it very convincingly. And after she said the reason why I won it so convincingly is because I listened to my coach for once. And then obviously, I think it's Swiatek. Her coach was getting really annoyed because she wasn't listening to her. She wasn't listening to him as much. But yeah, she definitely has those tendencies. It'll be interesting to see if she takes her game to the next level next year as well, because she has the tools to compete at the highest level, as you said. It was also good to see like someone like Sabalenka towards the back end of the year kind of gain a bit of confidence at the start of the year, and understand, I think, with outside factors, she wasn't playing particularly well, and there's always the question marks around double faults, etc. But back end of the year on the indoor swing, which is probably because, again, like there's no outdoor conditions, so serving conditions are very, very good. But in fairness, her form picked up, and I thought she played some really good tennis towards the back end of the year, and hoping that she kind of carries through, because she is one of those power players, and she brings a different dynamic to, say, a Jabeur or a Swiatek. But her game is quite exciting to watch as well.
Absolutely. Another great sort of character with a different personality. She's a power player, and with that serve, she struggled with the yips early in the season, maybe relating to, actually, who knows if her maybe her problems preceded the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but as you know, she's Belarusian, so she was not able to compete under her flag and not able to compete at Wimbledon, which is a shame with that serve. But she is a great star to have on tour, and I see big things from her. I do see her winning a Grand Slam at some point.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it could be at Wimbledon, as you were saying, because last year she should have made the final. She kind of maybe didn't choke, but she was the favorite against Pliskova in that final, and sorry, in that semi-final even. I didn't come through, so, and she's gone deep at the US Open as well. So it'll be interesting to see how she gets on at the start of the year coming up. But there's loads of people we could talk about in terms of having disappointing seasons, but we'll be here forever. We genuinely will. So I'm going to ask you probably the easiest question of the podcast, which is, who was the best player on the women's side in your opinion?
Yeah, Iga. And it's we need this is good. We need to have seasons like this on the WTA tour, because for so long we had one and done Grand Slam winners, and some fan bases were like, "Oh, this is great. It's unpredictable." But you have to understand that the general public doesn't get to know
Yeah.
Barbara Krejcikova if she only wins once and then never wins again. And to amass slams, then you can start to build rivalries, which makes things really exciting. So it was great to see someone start running away with things. So Iga.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed. Breakthrough player of the year? Do you have anyone in mind?
Maybe Jessica Pegula.
Yeah, she had a great season. Yeah.
High-ranked American player. I'll just be honest with you. Her game style is not my preferred as a watch, but I have to give her props. I mean, she's just hard to shake, or both from a mental, but also from like a tennis standpoint. She's an incredible defender, beautiful mover, and when she gets break point down, you just can't count her out. She's like Novak in that way, just an incredibly steady and solid player. So yeah, she'd be my breakthrough.
Yeah, I mean, she had a fantastic year, and I think won her first Masters 1000 tournament. I think in pretty good fashion. So I mean, she's definitely coming along, and I imagine she will start going even deeper at the slams next year. So a good sign for American fans, I imagine. She's been very steady, I feel like, the last few years, but this year, and she's taken that next step, which is great for her. And then, do you have a match in mind for favorite match of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I got to be real honest here. I'm sure that there were tighter matches and closer matches, but my favorite match was Serena Williams' final match against
Mm,
Isla Tomljanovic.
that's great.
And
That's a great match.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the reason was that it was an opportunity to see Serena one more time And while she didn't play a brilliant match, she played a good match, and she went down fighting, even until the last handful of points. And I love the way that Isla handled herself during that match, and it was compelling. It was a good watch.
It definitely was, and especially given how Serena played against Kontaveit the previous round, which was also a very exciting match, and she played so
Yeah.
well. And then against Tomjanovic, it was definitely a battle, and all the match points she was saving at the end as well. So it was a great watch, I thought, and probably a fitting way for her to go out the way that she was fighting towards the end. So yeah, she'll be missed. Although I don't know if she's retired or not, because she keeps on saying, and Venus keeps on saying that she's not retired. So I don't know if we should be talking about her retirement or not. I don't know. No idea. Yeah. Apart from that, Amy, anything you want to touch on before we wrap up?
Just that I wrote about this last week in my WTA. I did a WTA projection. What will, in 1 year from now, what will the WTA top 10 be? And you can find that on my Twitter if you want. I sense that, and this is just all like anecdotal, my perception. I sense that generally trends within tennis start usually in the men's game, and then it takes a couple of years before they seep over into the women's game. And I think that the players who are good at the net, competent volleyers in the men's game are starting to emerge as having just that one more tool in the toolkit, which is, really doing well for them. I think that will start to catch on in the women's game next year. And the players who will rise to the top have good volleys. So look at that one. Like, look at Caroline Garcia. She plays a lot of doubles. She has an excellent volley. Look for her to continue to do well.
Yeah, I think she's on the up and up. I don't think she's going anywhere for sure. And that's an interesting point about the volleys, and I guess Alcaraz kind of encapsulates that because his willingness to come to the net. Maybe the era of the baseliners, well, quote unquote, Djokovic and Nadal, when maybe 10 years ago. Now they've kind of evolved, but they are the archetypal kind of baseliners back in the day. But the game, I feel like, is now moving towards having that more all-round, well-rounded game, and also the willingness to come to the net, as you say. So it's going to be interesting, I think, and exciting, because I'm happy to see a bit more dynamism in there. So yeah, thanks, Amy, for being on. Really appreciate it. As Amy mentioned, do check her out on Twitter, and she has some fantastic articles that I've read as well. I need to check that one out, so I'll have a read of that tonight, for sure. And yeah, do check out, of course, 3-Year Tennis Podcast as well that Amy's on, and there's a lot of links on your Twitter, as I know, to other fantastic articles as well. So thank you again, Amy, for being on. Really appreciate it, and we'll definitely catch up as well at some point.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Faizan.
No problem. Thanks, everyone. Stay safe and well, and remember to hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. Thank you.